Hey, my name is Meg Nimigon, and welcome to Inside Leadership with High Value Women. In this series, I'm hosting conversations with women leading at the highest levels, asking hard-hitting questions to get to the bottom of what it takes and what you need to be a high value woman in today's workplace. My guest today is Wendy Milne, president at Go Brands. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you, Meg. Super, super stoked to be here.
Amazing. Let's dive in then. So, I'd love to know, what do you think people misunderstand most about what it actually takes to operate at the leadership level, especially a senior leadership level?
I mean, maybe more than one thing, but if I were to put just one point on it, I think at the end of the day, the leader is often looked at as the decision maker or maybe even the tiebreaker in some instances. But more important than what decision you come to, I think, is how it is that you come to it. Each of us has our own individual filter. And as a leader, you're often managing across teams, across projects, different challenges, whatever it is your scope may be. And it can be very overwhelming trying to absorb the information, the signals, the feedback from your team. So being able to leverage your own filter that helps you separate what is news that is relevant to me and what is noise that I
Mm.
not really allocate the time for is incredibly important, while also giving yourself the space to do exactly that. And I think that's what allows you to understand, okay, maybe my data is incomplete and I need to follow my gut now, which I get more confidence in the more that I give myself the time and the space to build that filter. If I think of the industry that I'm in currently within cannabis, it's so fast paced. It can be very, very tempting to listen to the noise. And often there is not much news in it. So we really look to be myopically focused on the problem that we're solving. And that is the biggest lever that I use in my filter to understand, does this contribute to the problem I'm solving? If no, then to me, that's noise. And I have to just continue to move forward.
Yeah. When you talk about your filter, like you've touched on it, but like, what do you consider your filter right now when you're thinking about a big decision or being that tiebreaker?
Honestly, I think it's the time that I give myself to take the space. If I have a problem that I know I need to solve for, great. What do I need to understand to go and solve that? So I try to collect as much data as I can. At being someone that tends to lean more analytical when I can try to explain or justify something through the numbers. But like I said, that's often incomplete. And that's when your gut comes in, which is relying on experience, calling my peers, and trying to create whatever network that I can assemble together to support that filter.
Love that. What would you say would be the difference between, how you might have made decisions near maybe the beginning of your career or maybe when you first stepped into leadership versus where you are now? Like, what would you say is the difference in how you make decisions, or how do you step into that more gut instinct versus when you maybe first started out?
I think I know when it comes to time that I have likely fewer answers than I maybe would have thought I had on day one. It's very easy to
Okay.
think an idea is the answer when more often that needs to be massaged. It needs to be worked out with people. And I am much more patient now and disciplined in
Mhm.
understanding I often need to ask more questions versus just giving a knee jerk reaction, which I used to do and try to just move to action very quickly. Now I try to be much more deliberate and give myself the time to plan before moving to action and really think through those ripple effects of what decision you can make.
Yes, amazing. Okay, so I'm curious, what personal values do you have as a leader that you think might set you apart from traditional leadership styles that maybe you've seen in the past or we've grown up with? And I'm curious how you use those values to maybe guide how you show up, guide how you make your decisions.
I think if I think of what I thought a leader, I think if I think what I thought a leader was growing up would often be someone that is stoic, that is unshakable.
Mm,
I think what I've learned through the different opportunities I've had in my career is that my biggest strengths are almost the opposite of trying to be too stoic or unshakable. I
mm.
want to be as transparent as possible with people. I want to understand the entire value chain of an organization for each team, what they do, and how we connect with one another. And I think in trying to do those two things, what I also try to bring most as a compliment to them both is trying to be a leader with empathy. But admittedly, I do think a lot of people try to bring empathy into a situation, but it is being transparent and understanding the value chain that helps me to be more empathetic, because in understanding the value chain, I can better understand if I make a decision to do X, it'll impact Y, and understanding how that could possibly bleed or impact other teams along the way to me is absolutely critical to any decision I make, because you can often think that we're making something in isolation, but more often than not, that will have impacts across people, processes, or even perception. And if you're as transparent along the whole way as you can be, which I understand is a luxury, we can't always tell everybody everything all the time,
Mhm.
But the more that you try to be transparent and ensure that we're all reading from the same page of the playbook, the more we're all prepared for those types of big changes or impacts that can often cause those ripple effects or discomfort across teams. So I think that that's what I'm trying to bring anytime that I'm leading a group of people, is trying to ensure we're all on the same page, understanding why it is doing what we're doing, have a very clear impact, and communicate across the different teams to identify what we all do that impacts one another. And ultimately, just trying to be a good person at the end of the day while doing it, I think goes a very, very long way.
Yeah, it's really cool that you mention it that way because I think often I see, especially when people are starting out in leadership, they think like doing the right thing or trying to be a kind person is sometimes pleasing each person. And so instead of looking at that wider view, like you're talking about, understanding the impacts, like the bigger picture, and then being able to communicate that, I find people get stuck in the weeds trying to think about, making decisions to please each team member. And the way that you're describing it is actually kind to think about the bigger picture, to be able to communicate the why behind your decision. Because it can have, if you're just trying to please one person, it's going to have negative impacts in another area that maybe you haven't considered. So I love that you're bringing to the forefront, the importance of taking that wider view. And as a leader, having confidence in your ability to know why you've made a decision the way that you've made it and be able to communicate that more, tied to the value that you're trying to create versus trying to please your teammates. Do you resonate with that? Have you had that challenge yourself?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And anytime you're leading, especially across multiple teams that have to work in parallel with each other, it can be easy for one of them to perceive decisions to be either in favor or against, whether it's for me or against me. And it's very
Mhm.
rarely that sort of singular. But I think, again, that comes back to the transparency piece. And it goes as far to say being transparent is not just why we're making decisions, but it's also, hey, maybe I made the wrong decision, and being able to have
Mhm.
that type of vulnerability amongst the team so that they know that I'm not here pretending I have all the answers. It's certainly a work in progress as we go. Um,
Mhm.
but being able to sort of invite people along for the journey and acknowledge that we're learning as we're going here.
Yeah. So, something I find interesting is despite the fact that women make up nearly half the workplace, we hold just 22% of C-suite positions. And I'm curious from your own anecdotal experience, you've worked on C-suite positions in a couple of areas now, and now you're president. I'm curious, based on your own experience, why you think that is and what you think needs to be done to change that.
It's a good question. It's a loaded question. I'd like to think if I had the answer, I would be pursuing it or helping you to help me pursue it right now. So, candidly, I do not have the solution, but I think it's stating the obvious is there's a pattern here. I've worked with high, or a large amount, I should say, of highly capable women across sales, operations, marketing, strategy, any facet that I've worked in. I've been fortunate to work alongside very talented people overall, but in particular women. But the gap always shows up at these transition points, right? From manager to director, from director to VP, from VP onward, we continue to sort of see the thinning. And my interpretation is that a lot of that upward trajectory is often associated with a very linear career path. But I think you and I both know that careers are very, very rarely built in a linear way anymore, especially for women.
Mhm.
So to solve it, I think it truly comes down to accountability and visibility. And the visibility, I think everybody owns, and that's driven by mentorship and sponsorship, ensuring people are a part of these conversations, whether they're in the room or not. But bringing up names is incredibly important.
Mm.
And I don't believe is done enough in many of the boardrooms that I've been a part of. But accountability at the end of the day for leadership levels to bring the change that we know can, and very, I shouldn't say very, very easily, but can easily be implemented.
Mm.
And that's through meaningful and tangible measures ultimately to drive it at the end of the day. We can all say that there's an opportunity, but if we don't start actually having plans put in place, accountability to be held, and goals or timelines that we're holding ourselves to, then admittedly, I think it often just becomes a bit of a talk track versus, hey, let's leverage this as a part of our competitive advantage, continue to widen the scope of the lens that we have to look at the issues that are at hand. And personally, I have to hold myself accountable to it as well. I need to be sure that I am bringing up people in conversation that deserve to be part of that room, that I'm being an effective leader and demonstrating what I believe is effective leadership to those that I had the opportunity to support, whether that's through mentorship, sponsorship, or even just advocating for the change when I have an opportunity to be in those rooms to help drive it.
Yeah, I love that you're sort of naming the idea of just naming people, like the simple act of thing, like bringing people's names into the room, bringing experiences into the room that aren't there, because it feels very tangible. And again, it's so easy for all of us to get caught up in our own day to day and problems and forgetting that piece. And so I think it's really powerful that you brought that. I'm curious, what is a growth edge for you as a leader that you're currently leading into? Maybe like a skill set or a capability or a mindset that you're working on in your own leadership journey. And I'd love for you to share it and also, why you're working on it.
Sure. I do believe in always learning. I think if you're the smartest person in the room, as the saying goes, you're in the wrong room. And I've spent the last decade working for some of the largest organizations in the world, which comes with really vast resources, tons of support, big teams. And now being at the polar opposite of that as an entrepreneur, it's a very different sort of seat to be in as the operator of sort of each facet on a day-to-day basis. So what I am most focused on is being in a very intentional building stage where we need to it's I need to
Just
ensure
me.
that I'm able to do things that help me continue to focus as much as my time as I can on our strategy and the brands that we're creating, which
Mm,
means I need to improve my AI literacy. I need to be able to have that automation and processes set up to take over the back office tasks that are essentially redundant, repetitive, and taking time away from the time that I need to dedicate to this other area of the business. And being able to do all of this process and organization and tool development while building our sales and strategy and go to market strategy and creating new brands in an effort to build an entire category within cannabis and do that in a very lean and focused way. It's a new skill set for sure because I haven't had to flex it at these larger organizations. But that type of discipline that I'm continuing to exhibit for myself is what makes me most excited about this and what
mm,
makes me more and more confident that we don't need a big payroll to have a big impact. We just need to remain hyper focused on the goals that we're here to achieve and ensure that we have world-class systems being built for ourselves as best we can so that when it does come time to grow and add more people, they're coming into a solid foundation. They know that we have a clear direction and have built everything in and around it. So I think that's a long-winded saying. I'm trying to be able to do more with less as a one-woman team.
yes, I can definitely resonate with that. I'm curious, you mentioned the word discipline. I love the word discipline myself. I love the word since becoming an entrepreneur, right? You start to see what it takes to really make something happen. And discipline has definitely been one I've leaned on. I'm curious, how do you generate discipline for yourself? What do you think drives your discipline?
Being able to work from home is what I see as one of the most wonderful advantages of being an entrepreneur, but it also means I'm home with my partner and our daughter, and it can be very tempting to step out of the office, go play with a beautiful 15-month-old baby, or go and step out and have lunch and simply just look away from what it is that I'm doing. And I will not change it for the world, but those little measurements of saying no, continuing to stay focused. I write myself weekly and daily to-do lists. I like to have myself have tangible things to check off at the end of the day
Mm.
because I know that all of those pillars are ultimately leading to the goals that we have 12, 18, and 24 months from now.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting, right? We all have those areas, like whether you're working, I know a lot of my clients work from home too, and it can be very easy to, lose that discipline or even, things like distractions, like notifications, meetings,
Mhm.
things like that. So it sounds like, having kind of daily results driven tasks that you want to do, weekly goals. I also hear from you like a vision in terms of what you're building. You're very clear, so I can see that that would help drive your discipline. But yeah, I think it's a skill that a lot of leaders don't, a lot of leaders do think about it, but the more that you can, get this skill of discipline, responsibility, like some of the emotions that maybe we don't really think of when we think of leadership, we think of like power and all of these other pieces.
Right.
But some of the like, the dirty work is like the discipline, showing up every single day and continuing to keep ourselves on track, I think is a really important one. All right, the last question I have for you is when you flash forward and you think about your life, what legacy do you want to be remembered by?
Depending on how far forward I'm flashing, I would say if it's the next 3 to 5 years, I hope that it is tied back to what we're working on today, which is building out the light category within cannabis. But if I continue to zoom out, most honestly, I'd say that I hope whoever it is that I've worked alongside remembers having fun. If
Mm,
I'm doing anything as often as I'm working, it better have some fun to it because I I believe that that's absolutely essential. So I would hope they would know we had a good time as much as we could, that I would never ask anyone to do something I wasn't willing to do myself, and that I showed up with integrity at the end of the day. And even if they do feel the Sunday scaries, there's a sense of security there because they have a partner in what it is that they're working through versus just a boss or a leader.
Mm.
But more importantly, it'd be fun.
Yeah, amazing. I think that you do emulate for me, having known you for some time, these like both these words that we just said was discipline and also fun, right? And how can you hold those two things in? And I could see that as like something as a value you'd want to put forward when you're thinking of hiring, right? Because like imagining people who come in who can have the discipline and can have the fun can be
Mhm.
such an important, generator of the business that you're creating. And I know you lead by example in that. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing in leadership in the world. Thank you for taking the time to share some of this with those who are watching. I really appreciate that. And I hope that I can continue to follow along on this journey and see Go Brands really take off in the next, let's not hope 3 to 5 years, let's hope it's in the next year.
I like that plan. Thanks, Megan.